All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is the I guess it's what, Steve, the 14th month, the 14th day of what day are we on the biblical calendar right
That's
now?
a
We
great question. I have to go back and look at it all. I'm sorry. I've been so watching different things and so busy in my studies. I haven't even looked at the day or
well,
the month.
according to Steve and I's understanding, we're on the 38th day of the counting of the Omer. That will be ending here shortly, and so what
Yes.
we're going to be talking about is what we would know as June 5th at sundown and June 6th, the full day until the next sundown, being the 40th day from when I believe Yeshua ascended and returned to his place, and where we are currently, and if he actually does return to the day, 2 days later or 2,000 years later, and this is the day that he returned to his place. So that was sort of the mindset of having this chat. And I like Steve because he thinks outside the box and is not trying to be dogmatic on, no, it must be Yom Teruah when everything happens, or it must be Yom Kippurim, or no, it's Tabernacles, or so that's why I like to have Steve on to banter about it. And he hasn't written many books or anything, so he gets to be flexible.
That's right. That's right. Amen, brother. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah, I don't want to ever write a book. That's something I just unless it's defending Torah, I'll do that. But besides that, nope. Yeah, it's funny because my teaching on this is in the days of Noah. And if you haven't seen that teaching, I really encourage you to try to check that teaching out because we can't cover all of it in this one. Why reteach it another teaching? We'll hit some highlights of it, of course, but there's lots of things in that teaching that I think point to the significance of these 10 days, the 10 days last 10 days leading up to Shavuot. And you emailed me thinking, do I think Yeshua could return on that 40th day of the counting, 2 days, 2,000 years later? I'm open to that, very open. That being said, I don't lean to it. I still lean to the resurrection taking place like on the eve of Shavuot, the day before.
Okay.
And I say that if you look at going to Exodus 19, 20, and then it jumps to 24. But it's from 1920 is where you see Yahweh say to the people, be ready on the third day. And then you get to the third day, which is the day before Shavuot. You see the mountains covered in smoke, the fire's coming down. You hear a trumpet going louder and longer. And that's all the parallels that we see. Then we discussed this last time we talked as far as the similarities of what we see in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 that Paul talks about. He'll come down in the clouds, a great trumpet will blow, we'll all be gathered together in the clouds. And so it's like there's lots of similarities for me anyway that point to this being the day before. And then what happens the day before? You have that resurrection on the day before, and then you've got the marriage of the Lamb on Shavuot. Okay. But now it's so cool because I ran across some things. I was talking to my friend who lives in Canada. We discuss things all the time. And he brought something up that kind of goes in line with what you believe as far as not per se a resurrection, but a gathering of the believers. And then the resurrection takes afterwards. And we'll get to that in a little bit. I thought you'd be rather interested in this. But as always, I always look for patterns. Patterns in the Bible are just something we need to look at. And they may not always be cyclical. I mean, they're going to be cyclical, but they may not be always identical.
Correct.
But still look for the patterns and try to, piece these things together. That being said, we know Yeshua ascended on the 40th day of the count to Shavuot, the 27th day of the second month at the time of Yeshua. Well, it just so happened to be that the flood came on the 27th day of the second month, according to the Septuagint. Now, if you read the Hebrew Masoretic, that's going to give you the 17th day. And we can go into the debate of all the problems that the Hebrew Masoretic has. Not that it's all bad, but it's got some major errors. Now, let me clarify too. I also admit and acknowledge that the Greek Septuagint has errors too. So it's hard for us to find out what is right. That being said, I really lean to the element of the Septuagint being more correct in this area, that they were in the ark for 1 full year to the day, 27th day of the month. And then we know that even the Hebrew Masoretic says they came out of the ark on the 27th day of the second month. So I find it ironic that that would be the 40th day at the time of Yeshua of the counting, when he ascended into heaven in front of the angel, in front of the disciples. But that gives us 10 days left in the count. Now, as you mentioned, the patterns and stuff. There are multiple days of patterns we see, about 10 days in the scriptures. One that always pops out to me is the church of Smyrna in Revelation, where it says they will suffer for how many days?
10 days.
10 days. And so my friend and I, we're always open, but we really lean heavily that that's going to be the church in Jerusalem. Meaning, now I say church, I'm talking true believers, hardcore, the believers in Yeshua. And I'm really concerned that that could be the 10 days that's going to be hardest on them. In fact, Yeshua said, when you see the sign, to do what? To flee. And it's speaking to those specifically, those in Jerusalem. And I think we may even discuss this slightly a little bit the last time we talked, is like, I think more so that not so much to flee because of what's coming in, but if you don't flee, you won't get out, because I think they're going to seal everything up whatever causes it. Of course, my current thought is that something to do with the Ark of the Covenant and the Temple Mount, and that will be what causes all of the Islamic nations to surround Jerusalem at that time, at least start surrounding them. Yes, they're at war now, but we've always seen wars. Yes, it's getting more intense. I'll give you that too. But for the most part, I think we all would agree that Jerusalem in itself is not literally surrounded at the very edges all around, not yet. And I really think we're going to be seeing that sometime soon. Maybe, maybe not. If we do, I believe that would be the trigger for me. And obviously, as I always watch specific days on the calendar every year, not just 1 year, it's like I'm always watching biblical dates every year. And this is one that's really piquing my interest right now with all that we're seeing going on in the world. And what I really find interesting regarding this specific 40th day in the counting to Shavuot, as you said, it's June 6th, starting for us, starts in the evening of June 5th, going into June 6th. That day just so happens to be exactly 40 days to the 9th day of the 4th month. Now, to someone who doesn't, study the history of Jerusalem, especially biblical history I'm talking, that day may just kind of go right over your head and not think anything of it. But the 9th day of the 4th month is the day the walls were breached when Jerusalem was invaded by Babylon on the first destruction of the temple. So that's an important date. I mean, that's the first day it's noted in the prophets and in Jeremiah. I can remember in the Kings. It's also probably in Chronicles, where the 9th day of the 4th month was when the walls were broken through and Babylon began their invasion. So, but then you think, well, Steve, okay, that's the day. Why? What's the significance with the 40 days? I have a note here. Here it is. Let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of my notes. Forgive me. And please interject anytime you want to say something.
That's fine.
It's in Ezekiel 4, and I have made multiple teachings on this. This is where it's verses 1-3 discusses how Ezekiel's supposed to make, a clay little, not pot, but yeah, I guess it was a clay tablet, and put Jerusalem on it. Then he puts, sieges all around it. And then it's verses 6-8, where it discusses even more so that this siege on Jerusalem will last for 40 days. And it says that this siege is going to be a sign to the house of Israel, the northern kingdom. And so somewhere in time, this is going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. Anyone who wants to try to say, Bible prophecies are all completed yet. Well, no, this hasn't. This has not. And this is even specifically talking when Yeshua says, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded, hey, flee. This is what he's referring to, Ezekiel chapter 4. It's very important that we understand that. And so he's not just negating Ezekiel. He is saying, he's speaking specifically to Ezekiel 4.
Well, you have another witness in Zechariah 12 and 14. I mean, all nations will end up gathering against Jerusalem and the house of Judah.
True.
And so, I mean, again, and piecing all the prophets together and Yeshua's feet landing on the Mount of Olives, and yet he comes from Batra with bloodstained clothes. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and that's why the more I get in depth and study and listen to other prophecy geeks, and I'm sorry, that's what we all are.
Yeah.
And the less dogmatic I am about dates, times. I spoke to the gentleman that too, Messiah 2030, and I'm like, no, man, I just got to be more wiggly than you. I'm sorry, I don't trust the ancient dates. If I was going to favor a day, I would probably go with 30 AD, but I can't prove it to myself beyond a reasonable doubt. So why would I want to teach it as being, beyond a reasonable doubt? So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yeshua is returning at some point in time in the future. I believe the near future, but I wouldn't even teach that dogmatically, just 99.99%.
Right. Well, that's why I say it's like I have the dates that I watch, the biblical dates that I watch every year, and so I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that viewpoint is wrong. I just know that I can't say it's right either. That's why I'm always watching. And with what we're seeing going on in the world today, things are really heating up more. It's so funny, man, because I keep thinking it's going to slow down, and I have said this on multiple different teachings at different times, or not teachings, but the our world news updates. You just think it's going to slow down somehow, because in the past it would heat up, cool down, heat up, cool down, and it's kind of put you on this emotional roller coaster. And that's why I said I'm done. I'm just going to stick to what the Bible says. I don't care what's going on. Well, now I've been doing it for so long. I'm seeing more and more dots connected with what I'm seeing going on in the world, even more so now than ever. So, but like you said, it's like it can go on for a long time. Who knows?
Well, and I say I'm not dogmatic, and I'm not, but I will say that back in the 80s, even as I really believe that Yeshua would return around 2030-ish, and I wasn't the least bit concerned. There were so many things that weren't even possible yet. And then in 2008, I'm like, no, this is not it. The blood moons of 2014, 15 that a lot of people made a lot of money on selling books. Like, no, this could be like a warning. That could be warning of an event that might happen in 14 years. It started getting my window room. When I read 2017, my buddy Curtis at Donkey Speaks, he puts out a teaching that the rapture is not happening on Yom Teruah. When people were all thinking that the rapture would happen back in the fall of 2017, the sign of the woman.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we're a solid 10-ish years away. And again, I know your time frame could be 2, 3, 4 years before mine, but that's where I'm still at it. But in 2020, Steve, I'm like, when the scamdemic hit, and I like this, we're getting really close. That was sort of my wake up call. And then like you said, we've seen these other events unfolding. So far, I think they're just simmering. To borrow from Halisa, I believe and she put out a teaching in 2020 on this, that even for the past 4 years, the Father's just gently flapping his wings right now, trying to get his children to return to his ways and his truth. And prophetically speaking, the fact that there are millions around the world that are now understanding that they're Israel, and Yeshua meant what he said. They can look at the earth underneath them. They can look at the heavens and the skies and go, well, maybe what I was taught is untrue, and maybe what Yeshua actually says is true. And that's prophetic. Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 30. Now, I don't think we've had the I don't like to use the term revival, but I don't believe we've had that restoration yet, and it's not coming until the distress when in Deuteronomy 4, when my people who are scattered and they come under this distress. It's sort of like you saw it before I did, Doug Hamp saw it before I did. Different people have had their eyes opened, at various times, but it's mushrooming now.
Yes.
I mean, the conversations I'm having with Baptists and Methodists and Pentecostals and even Presbyterians, we don't have any Lutherans down here, but, even they're starting to, instead of shutting me down like they were 3 or 4 years ago, they're actually listening. They're starting to see this distinction between Ephraim and Judah and understanding that the Jews aren't all of Israel.
Right. It's so cool that you say that, because I just started a series we started working on simply titled Come Let Us Reason. And I'm purposefully making them like under 10 minutes, but at least something like, a good 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes long, but to hit all of the controversial debates that people always bring up. And I'm finding people, and I'm getting people saying they're liking it because it's good for them to share. And it's also teaching them, helping them to be able to share it on their own, the scriptures and the debates, because they're getting hungry. They're wanting to know, they're seeing what they've been taught for all these years. Something's not adding up. And to your point, my prayer is that people keep waking up and keep seeing it and come to the truth.
It's happening. I mean, it's all in Yah's plan that both houses would be partially blinded and hardened.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that applies to Judah when it comes to the testimony of Yeshua, and that applies to Christianity when it comes to the truth of the Torah. I mean, Isaiah 11 and both houses have stumbled around I think things were pretty solid for the first 20, 30, 40 years, but even during, even obviously when Peter was alive and Paul was alive, Paul was already being twisted to support what I would call modern day Christianity in a partial lawlessness doctrine. I do like to say partial because solid Christians, they keep 85% of the law. They just don't realize it.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
They just they don't do the parts that they were taught were Jewish.
Right. Right. Well, you going back to on topic here, I was looking at Zechariah earlier today too, the verses that chapters you mentioned, like 12 through 14 and stuff. And I'm really leaning, as I've been reading the context, I'm thinking that's more at the end. And I think if you go with the context I was giving with Ezekiel 4, where it says Jerusalem's surrounded, and then as you see the punishment on the northern kingdom for so many days as well. If you continue reading chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it all discusses the timing, how this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, there's a sealing that takes place. And then at the same time of that sealing, immediately there is a destruction going on in Jerusalem and around. And so for me, where I'm at today, I'm really watching for that, because I believe those are the days Yeshua is just specifically saying, when you see Jerusalem surrounded, know that its destruction is at hand. And yeah.
You had mentioned about you believe the ark will come out, and that actually could be that almost idolatry or worship of the ark, as Israel was prone to do and had to get rid of. I forget what was the budding staff that they had to get rid of because they were idolizing it.
Not the budding staff, but the copper snake.
Yeah, the copper snake. And so I was reading 2 or 3 weeks ago, because grew up dispensationalism, that I long ago unlearned, and I say long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, unlearned the dispensational view of a future 70th week and an Antichrist making a 7-year peace treaty and letting the Jews start their sacrifices. And then the abomination would be when he comes in and ends them. And I'm reading Isaiah 66, and Yah's asking, who do you think you are? And I'm paraphrasing here. Who do you think you are to build me a house?
Right.
And then he talks about, any type of offering would be akin to murder. It would be akin to breaking a dog's neck. It would be even a grain offering would be like offering pig's blood.
Correct.
And I'm going, what if the abomination, and I'm not going to say that it would be the abomination of desolation, but those sacrifices, when they're instituted, will be abominable to Yah. I mean, you're spit there. It's like spitting in Yeshua's eye, sort of like, I don't know where you are on this. I don't want to offend you or your audience, but the broken shank bone on a Seder plate.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can't prove it, but why would you want to have a broken lamb bone when Yeshua is the lamb? He's the Lamb of God that had no broken bones. So
I was just going to say, with no broken bones.
So I told my friend Jeff, we're really good friends. I said, I tell you what, next year when we have a Seder, he's already gotten rid of the egg and stuff. I said, if y'all want to have your shank bone, I'm going to have the biggest unbroken lamb bone on my plate. And then my table's going to get a
special. Rebel, you.
Yeah, well, I just, I'm like, why don't we just have an unbroken lamb bone? So.
Well, I think if they would simply at least acknowledge its tradition, because it's not biblical. And for what it's worth, in one of my recent teachings on Passover and stuff, where it talks about the bitter herbs, the Hebrew doesn't say bitter herbs. It's the bread of bitterness. That's what it is.
The unleavened bread.
If we start breaking it down, man, there's so many traditions that we've thrown in, and we need a challenge. Do what Paul said: test everything. And it's because we don't do the bitter herbs anymore. It's because the Hebrew doesn't say that.
Jeff does go through and he talks about this is tradition.
Okay.
And again, a lot of times we can't necessarily get the facility on what we would believe would be Passover, and so we'll just kind of it's actually a good outreach to Christians.
Yeah,
it really is, as long as it's being explained that what's biblical versus what would be a tradition. I mean, I love the fact that they hide the bread and everything. That's like a great picture of Yeshua. I don't know. I guess the Messianic slipped that in there.
Yeah, it could have been.
I got a question. Somebody's got a question for you, and this, because I still lean towards Yom Teruah, but and that 10-day period, that 10 days of awe between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippurim. Yep. I mean, that's where if you pin me down and could make my Jello, kind of stay a little firmer, that's where I'm still. But if the rapture does not take place, I would say the resurrection on a future Yom Teruah. Then what do you believe will be fulfilled on that future Yom Teruah?
Is this the question from online?
Yeah. Question from Kurt. Question for Steve. If the rapture does not take place on the future Yom Teruah, then what do you think, Steve, will happen on that day that would fulfill prophecy?
Yeah, cool. And I have much to cover still, too. So I don't want to drift too from our topic. Okay. But to answer his question, I answered this specifically. I believe it's in my teaching, the prophetic significance of Shavuot. It's a online teaching, not online, forgive me. It was a conference I did up in Michigan back in 2019. And I addressed it in that teaching. But real quickly here, my current understanding may change tomorrow, but I really believe that the resurrection takes place at the time of Shavuot. Okay. Now, to answer the question, what then happens at trumpets? What then happens at Shavuot? Atonement, and even Sukkot in the future? What's the prophetic significance of those? If you're saying, Steve, that the resurrection happens here, I believe that the first resurrection, because there's 3 resurrections, let's not forget, and I have to say this to answer the question for you. Yeshua is the first resurrection, the first fruits. And this is 1 Corinthians 15, around verse 20-ish, okay? And then it says the next resurrection, which would be considered the first resurrection, would be at his time of his coming.
And then
correct. And then the second resurrection at the end of all things, at the end of the millennium. And this is where I believe is going to be fulfilled, if you want to say the word fulfilled, how we would, understand it. Yeshua raises everyone at the second resurrection. Those who did not was a part of the first resurrection will now be all resurrected together at the time of Day of Trumpets. Now, why would I say this? Think of it this way. Yeshua, first fruits at barley harvest. And then you've got the first resurrection, which is the first wheat harvest, only wheat. And then but remember, you have 2 wheat harvests, and that comes in the fall. You'll have the second wheat harvest, and then you'll have all of the grapes, all the other fruity things that would be harvested then. So at the end, you have the believers and the unbelievers resurrected at the time, and then you go into the time of judgment. And the time of judgment is what? The Day of Atonement, where we stand before the great white throne judgment for all those who have not been judged already. Okay, so this is the final judgment of all at the Day of Atonement, leading us into what? The great 8th day. You have Sukkot and the 8th day of eternity from there on out, showing forth what Yahweh himself comes down and reigns with his son, and we're all together on earth at that time. So you have Day of Trumpets being the last trump, okay? Then you have Day of Atonement, which is going to be the final judgment. And then you've got Sukkot, where he comes down and tabernacles with all of us, talking Yahweh, the Father, on earth, and we enter into the great 8th day for eternity. So hopefully that answers this question. But again, I cover that in the teaching that I mentioned earlier.
All right, we can get back on track now.
Cool. Hopefully that answered it. If I can come back to that later.
I understand where you're coming from, at least.
Okay, cool. Well,
I'm a geek.
Right. Well, back to the 10 days. This is the 10 days that could represent the 10 virgins of Matthew 25, just the same. And I'm really leaning heavily to this regarding the 40th day count to the 50th day. Okay. Shavuot. But Yeshua, segregates the 10 virgins, 5 wise, 5 foolish. Why would he do that? I've struggled with that for so long. Well, in pondering this, he just gets done talking about the days of Noah. And then he says, it's like, as then now. And he continues in with, and again, I discussed this as in the days of Noah teaching. But the door is shut on Noah. And the door gets shut on the 5 wise virgins. It's opened for them, and then it's shut. So it's like they go out to meet him. They're waiting for him. This is in Matthew 25. Mm-hmm. And then while the 5 foolish are gone to get their oil, it's opened up. The wise go in, and it's shut. And then you still have the 5 foolish. So there's something telling me in my heart, wondering, I should say, now this is where it goes into your theory of could we all be gathered together, not so much the resurrection, but what some people would say the harpazo or whatever, and we're taken to Mount Sinai or whatever. Possible. And this could be that time where the 5 wise are taken, because it says it's time for the wedding, and they're let in and it's shut. And then you get the 5 foolish to 5 days. Now, this is what I find so cool. And I know everyone's got different calendars, so I'm just giving you what I got on my calendar, okay? As you know, I'm a firm believer in a 1-year tribulation. How it plays out exactly, I don't know. I go back and forth myself on it, okay? But I made a teaching last year about the 70 weeks of Daniel, how I really believe it's 70 literal weeks. When I made that, people are going, you're crazy, you're stupid. Okay, whatever. All I can tell you is people have been holding on to a view that the 70 weeks means, this many hundreds of years and this, that, and the other, and the last week is 7 years. Do you know that view has been held on for centuries, if not at least a millennia already? Well,
the Jesuit Ribera is the one that really came up with it.
Okay.
That's part of the Counter-Reformation. I mean, that's from my studies, he was sort of the inventor of it.
So here's the thing. Yahweh told Daniel, it's going to be sealed until when? The time of the end. So people have been holding on to a view here at this time that's been around for how many hundreds of years? Dude, that can't be right, in my opinion. And I'm really leaning heavy that it's supposed to be 70 weeks. Now, I've gone back and watched my teaching on the 70 weeks. I'm going, okay, I like that still. Okay, this may not be quite right here. I'm tweaking along the way. Well, even in this, so check this out. 5 days into the 10 days, it would be, let's for the fun of it, if we can do this, let's say this year is it. Okay, that means something in my books, something big has to happen on June 6th. Okay. Now, if not this time around, it's going to be the 40th day sometime. Okay. So keep that in mind. So we're playing for right now. It's still going to be something in the future in my current understanding. 40th day right now is June 6th. If you go 5 days, that takes you to next Tuesday, which I think is June 11th. Okay. Yeah. 5 days. Hello. So if you go exactly 70 weeks forward from that day, you land on the last day of Sukkot of 2025. So there's your 70 weeks. And as I've said before, I think the 70th week is the time of Sukkot. It's the 7 days of Sukkot. In fact, if you go to Daniel chapter 9, I don't have it in front of me. Daniel 9, I think it says in verse 25, it says 70 weeks are established for your people, and it lists all the reasons why, what's going to be taking place. The last one noted as far as the purpose for those 70 weeks is to anoint the most holy. The most holy, those exact words, I can't remember what they were in Hebrew now. I looked for them all over. They're only noted back in the Torah, and it's specifically talking about the altar, the most holy. And it takes how long to anoint it? Get it ready? 7 days. So it's the 70th week. That's the time. And then you get to what? The 8th day. We all rejoice because the altar is established. Everything can be under Yeshua, and it can start being done right.
Yeah, not abominable. Some people even recently, even though it was very clear, prior to Yeshua's return, his coming, his parousia or parousia, any sacrifices Judah does, I believe, is going to be an abomination. Point blank. They're not blessed. They're going to be abominable.
Yeah, well, again, as you mentioned, that's Isaiah 66.
Yeah. After Yeshua returns in Ezekiel 40 through 48 and a future Levitical system and sacrifices, I take that literal, but here's what I tell any Christian brother or Hebrew uprooter brother or anybody or Messianic. I'm not going to argue with you about it. When we get there, we're in this age. Let's deal with our problems right now.
Right.
Let's disagree in a nice, friendly way, as opposed to arguing about something that, when we get there, guys, it's going to be whatever King Yeshua says we do. And if he's like, you silly nillies that took this literally, I'm going to go, it's not like we're going to be sarcastic and go, well, your word said this, but no, we're just, okay, now I understand.
Right. It's we're all going to be like, dude, did I have that wrong? Or, man, I got that one right type thing. I just can't wait for that day. I am so longing for Yeshua to come, not just to set us straight. And I want that. But righteousness is going to rule. No more corrupt judges. No more. As I've always said, there's a reason why Yahweh's judges were white and the world's judges were black, And so I am longing for the day when true righteousness will rule the world. People can live with right rulings, and going, I can't wait. Anyway.
Well, it will be nice. I mean, in other words, it'll be perfect rule and righteousness and reign, the judicial system. Everybody's moaning and groaning right now about the orange man and his conviction. I just sit back and I mean, it's theater to me right now. The whole world is a stage, and we're just watching. We're watching the puppet masters manipulate the American people like the Nazi propagandists that they learned from the Nazis when we imported them over here after World War II. I mean, and it has been nothing but propaganda and programming ever since the 50s.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
It's like marionettes, you pull the string and you get this from the right, and you pull the string and you get this from the left. And it's amusing these days for me to watch it.
Well, and my biggest concern, and yeah, it is sad. My biggest concern in all of this is it's distraction. It's getting people's eyes off of from where it should be. And because there's so much going on with Russia right now that people aren't paying attention. And all the threats that Russia right now has been giving about nuclear elements, it's not towards Ukraine. It's towards the U.S. And people are not paying attention. And Yeah, but that's a whole different ballgame and topic, you know.
Again, how America gets judged, whether or not, whether it's, you know, natural disasters, whether it's climate change, that's not climate change, it's Yah, you know,
Yeah,
using his creation and his weather patterns to judge us,
mm-hmm.
nuclear weapons, terrorist attacks all over the country. I mean,
Right.
you know, how it happens and when it happens, I'm not certain, but it's coming. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I had Nathan on, and he's really been studying in Amos a lot, and he's like, man, I'm just reading Amos, and I'm going, this might as well to be to Western Christianity, and what will be happening.
Very much so. In fact, it's in Amos. It's since you brought Amos up, Amos 8. It's talking back and forth to both kingdoms. At one time, I was thinking, this one? It's like it's just one, or just the northern, or just the southern. No, it goes back and forth. And when it discusses, I think it's 8:9. I will turn your feast days into mourning. Man, that's like, you know, Shavuot. That's a feast day. I'll turn it to mourning. And so there's so much that can be applied here. But anyway, that's, you know,
Well, and
you
you've got the house of Israel. You've got a lot of people that, you know, we would consider ourselves of the house of Israel. Now understanding that we're Israel, that is a feast day for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and man, we can go on a long time with that one. I'm gonna tell you right now, because there's so much that people are overlooking, and it concerns me, because that's the day he says, hey, I'll make the sun go dark at noon. You know, it's going to happen on that day. And now, what day is it? Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. But I'm telling you, it will be a feast day. If there's one thing I'm convinced of, Yahweh acts and moves on his feast days. Yeshua, he came on the feast days, all those things. And so whenever the next big thing we're going to see, trust me, it will be building up to it and happen on one of his days.
I woke up on October 8th, which was the eighth day, and was just headed to the beach. And the manager said, where are you going? I'm like, I'm just going to the beach. She says, okay, just want to make sure you weren't trying to drive north. I'm like, why? And then that's the attack had happened that morning. And obviously, so there was police and military everywhere, it was on a feast day.
Yep.
So I think that was sort of like an initial salvo, a warning shot for Judah.
Yeah.
And it may have been you. I know, actually, it's a guy, I think his channel is Torah Class, an older gentleman. And he was talking about this and about Judah. He was not being anti-nation state of Israel, but he was saying, look, and I mentioned this to my buddy about this, who's Jewish, and about praying for Israel and their military. I'm like, this is not biblical. Judah is supposed to repent and rely upon YHWH.
Yes.
For their protection and their peace, not their military alliances with modern day Egypt, aka America, also known as Babylon,
right?
And France and Britain. And that's what's happening. We see all this angst and anxiety of you know, because that's, again, we live in reality. I understand alliances and everything, but if we truly are at the end of the age, all nations come against Judah. All nations, and I take that pretty literally. You know, all nations of America will abandon Judah. I can see, you know,
or be taken out of the way.
Yeah, or eliminated as a power, or at least crippled.
Right. Yeah.
But and we talked about it earlier about the you know, this is anathema to 99.99% of prophecy geeks. But looking at the 10 horns, well, wait a minute. How many tribes were of the house of Israel? And you got the 2 horns for the other beast. And how many tribes made up the house of Judah?
Yep, 2.
You know, so, and
it's right in Revelation 13. People don't see it though.
Who's a harlot in Scripture? It's always his people that are harlots.
Absolutely.
And right now, that's Christianity and Judaism. Well, I won't say Christianities and Judaisms. Okay, I don't need to, because there are many flavors in the fruits, nuts, and bolts. You know, of Hebrew uprooters. You know, everything. I mean, so that's just something for people watching to consider about these beast kingdoms. And we know there's a harlot religion, and the mother of all harlots.
Right.
So, you just get accused of being anti-Semitic or anti-Judah if you bring up this, but Judah's getting judged. I mean, severely. I mean, thankfully, corporately, they will look to him upon whom they pierced, and they will mourn, and the spirit of grace and supplication will be poured out. The fullness of the Gentiles will be coming in, and all Israel will be saved.
Right. Well, it's I've said this before, and I can't remember where I've said it, but when you look at, history, there's no doubt, when you look at the time of the Holocaust, Judah went, if I can say it, hell on earth, which was wrong. Okay. But what my concern is that people are not seeing the possibility that Ephraim will have their Holocaust next, and it's coming, But yeah, that's a topic we can keep going on.
Well,
I do want to go ahead.
I tend to Bible trail. I call it Bible trail.
Bible trail. There you go. Keep it clean. Well, back to the 10 days. So I really do believe whether it's these 10 days from the time of Yeshua's ascension to Shavuot, and how it works in line with the time of the flood, and all these different things. I really believe these 10 days could be a warning. And even I mentioned in our as in the days of teaching, days of Noah teaching, I just don't know how the warning will come. Will there be a warning at all? Because you look at Lot, he had just one day. Noah had 7 days. Could this be a 10-day warning that Yahweh is giving us for the end of all? I don't know. But if that's the case, I can easily see how the last 5 days, it's like a 5-day grace period, if you will, at the beginning. And if you're not where you got to be or do what you got to do by that time, the last 5 days, it's like, it's bad. It's hell on earth here then. And I know a lot of people there's lots of opinions on the seals. I get it. But my current understanding is that the seals have already been broken, but they're not in effect yet. Because if you look at Revelation chapter 10, you see the angel, which is messenger, it's Yeshua. And it says he roars like a lion of Judah, has a rainbow around him, which is Yeshua. Okay. So it's like, again, you got to read in the context there. And the scroll, he's holding a scroll, which was just sealed, but now it's laying completely open. And you get to the end of that chapter, it says there will be no more delay. So yeah, they're broken, but it's all the effects have been delayed from starting. So there's going to be one day that will happen, and boom, the delay is done. It's all full throttle, and it's going to be beyond our understanding, beyond comprehension. And if you're not in the place prepared, those 70 weeks when it starts is going to be the roughest time you can imagine. And, but it's, go ahead.
I was just going to, somebody had a question for you, and it's probably, and again, I do have quite a bit of historicism or a historicist view running through my veins. I'm a preterist, a historicist, a polemicist, an idealist, and a futurist. So if you ask me which one, because I'm a cyclicist.
Yeah,
prophecy is a pattern, and so
that's right.
Question for you: why do we use 10 days and not years? Is 1260, 1290? We use days and not years. How do we decide when a day is a day and a day is a year? I'm going to let you take it first because it's to you, and then I'll give my current understanding on this.
How do we decide if it's a day or a year?
Yeah, like in other words, this 10 days, you understand how SDA and they all did the day for a year principle everywhere. I mean, they applied it across the board.
Right.
And so I think what his question is, why would this 10 days be 10 literal days as opposed to a 10-year period?
Well, first of all, you can't apply one biblical thing and say it's across the board for everything. That's dangerous. I can't say that it's not, you could go 10 years. Okay. But at the same time, let's go back. He was doing 40 days. Okay. And then what? The last 10 days, he told them, go to Jerusalem. So there's 10 days. Now, what could have been 10 years? No, we know he was with them for 40 days. So then there's 10. You can take something in Scripture and apply it to anything else you want in Scripture. Say, well, look, it's the Bible interpreting the Bible. No, it's you interpreting the Bible through this way. And not saying it's wrong.
That's through a system. and
Yeah.
being locked into the system. Heiser hated the systems because he saw that there were partial parts that were true.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other parts that, no, you're trying to fit a square peg into a round circle.
Correct. It's not to say that those views are all wrong, but use extreme caution in saying it has to be this way.
Well,
You know, I mean,
again,
you got an orange that's round and an apple that's round. Well, they're the same. Are they? They're just round. They're still different. You know, so there's applications we need to be cautious as how you try to force an interpretation into the scriptures.
Here's a good example: our SDA brothers, and I don't think they're a cult. I don't think E.G. White is inspired prophet in her writings, but what they did, they were so gung ho on the 2300 from Daniel 8 that they predicted Yeshua's return 1843, then 1844, the Millerite movement. And then they doubled down and said, well, Yeshua really did return, and we've got this investigative judgment thing. So they never corrected their error. All they did is double down. And they can't. And then, when the papacy was founded in 1798, when Napoleon. And so, again, some of these things, I believe they are partial fulfillments of prophecy. Even Daniel's 70th week, like you talked about, I believe it could be literal 70 weeks. It could be 70 jubilees. It could be 77s of years. I believe it'd have multiple fulfillments of Yeshua's first coming. The Sultan rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem about 480 something years ago, and we're believing we're kind of approaching the end. You look at the ongoing abomination of desolation, when that's sitting there on the Temple Mount right now that says, Allah has no son. And you want to know how many years ago it was established? Oh, about 1280 something.
Yep.
So you start to, or maybe it's 1250 something, but you start to see, like, again, our historicist brothers, they make a lot of great connections. The problem is they try to fit everything into that day for a year principle. And I believe it can be both and. To go back to 2020, what if 2020 was this 10-year warning shot across the bow? In other words, you have this piece taken from the earth, not literal, not like a sword, but you have the whole world in a lockdown over probably a manufactured disease that killed less than 0.05% of people, and most of them had major pre-existing health problems, and many of them did not die because of the V. They died because of the protocols and the treatments they were given. Yep. And so, again, if that's a 10-year period, that would be an example. But I'm not sitting here pounding my fist on that. That started the 10 years,
Right. Well, and it's not I don't think it's an either or. It's a
both yes.
Yeah. You've got to look at all the possibilities, and because there's multiple ways for things to be interpreted, and they're not being wrong. They just simply overlay. I agree to that. Back to the point regarding the 10 days and stuff. Regarding when Yeshua ascended, they're all looking at him going up, and this is in Acts chapter 1. They're all looking at him ascending. Then what do we have? Two angels say, hey, yo, what are you doing? Of course, it's Steve's version, saying, it's like, he's going to come back in like manner. Okay. But I find it interesting how those two angels could be likened to the two witnesses. I mean, exactly when the two witnesses start the ministry, well, that's yet to be seen. There's lots of theories. I have my own teaching regarding who I think they are, and I'm really convinced that that's who he is, that being Ezekiel and John the Revelator. And opinions, I get it. But a thought to consider is, when do they start? And another question is, where do they start? And I say that because when we look at the two angels who came to Lot, okay, two witnesses, and where did they go? They went to Sodom to warn Lot and get him out. Okay. Then you have, so that's a parallel to the two witnesses in the end times. Now, and I'm not saying thus saith the Lord on this. I'm looking at patterns, cyclical patterns of what can be. Doesn't say that that's what this means, but Yahweh always works in similar patterns. I love it. Aaron and Moses. Okay. Where did they go to? Egypt. Went to Egypt to do what? Deliver his people. Okay. So my question is, could the two witnesses start their ministry in Babylon? telling the people, come out of her. You know what I'm saying? Now we know where they die, okay? Which to me kind of defeats the very purpose or the very argument I just brought up, because if you look, it's in Revelation 11 where it says, and they died in the streets of the city that is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, the very two places I just referenced earlier regarding Lot and Moses, okay, and Aaron, as far as the two witnesses. So deep inside my heart, I really lean that they're going to start and end and have their whole ministry in the place of Jerusalem. But I just thought it was interesting. Could they start in Babylon? Come out of her, my people. I don't know. I don't
To that,
weigh heavy to that at all. But I think it's an interesting thought.
I can see one of them testifying mainly to Judah, and the other testifying mainly to the house of Israel. In other words, Christianity, house of Israel. Please read Isaiah 11. Please read Isaiah 8. Please read Matthew chapters 5-7 and start building your house on rock instead of sand.
Yep.
And then to our brothers Judah, please read Isaiah 53, and all these other prophecies. And so, in other words, I believe it's going to, the main testimony is going to be calling to repentance,
right,
for his people and to those that are just total heathens right now and no relationship. But I do believe it's going to be maybe two leaders. But it will be corporate. The two olive trees and the two ecclesias, the two menorahs. I believe I don't think it's coincidence that it's number 2 and number 6 on the menorah and in the ecclesias. And Halisa calls them the memos to the 7 assemblies, because that's what they are. It's for people that should know better.
Right.
They're not like detailed. They're like inner office memos. You've already learned how to do everything, or you should have if you read the Torah. But these are sort of like reminders to these 7 ecclesias, and he has nothing negative to say about number 2 and number 6, Smyrna and Philadelphia.
Yep.
And so again, I see that being corporate house of Judah, corporate house of Israel, where Yah's saying, I really want y'all to really start being one, even before I know it's going to take my coming to really put you back together.
Right.
But I think that's going to be the testimony. And just to dovetail that, I do believe that 3.5 days. I want to ask you this. I cannot find anywhere in Scripture where there's ever 3.5 days mentioned, but I can find 1,260 days or 42 months and 3.5-year periods. And so I believe that what it is that corporately the witnesses get killed off over a 3.5-year period, and then there's the resurrection. What I still lean toward Yom Teruah, but I'm not discounting Shavuot.
Right.
You convinced me enough to be a little wiggly.
That's good. Well, the thing is, for me, when it comes to any kind of biblical timing of the end times, I struggle saying it has to be this or has to be that, because Yeshua said the days will be cut short. Now, whether it's cut short by 1 day, 2 days, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, they're cut short. And this goes back into my teaching where I bring out, what's the name of the teaching? Declaring the end from the beginning. And the whole element is that I think when the first judgment was given, this many days, 1,260, time and a half, the book is being thrown at him. The judge is mad. You get the maximum penalty. Well, now, but when it comes down to it, he cuts it short, because if he doesn't cut it short, no one would survive. No one. There would be no survivors. And we know prophet after prophet talks about how the survivors worked their way back to the land. Okay. My teaching Second Exodus talks all about that. So how short does he cut it short to? That's the question. And I really believe there's arguments that's plausible that he can cut it short to 6 months, or to 1 year, to the 70-week time frame that we're discussing. It's there. It is possible. So be very, very, very careful in saying it has to be this many days or that this long time. When Yeshua said it cuts it short, he cuts it short. And And I'm also a firm believer that it's the front part. I mentioned this in multiple teachings. The front part that gets shortened. That's why it's delayed from happening in Revelation 11 or 10. So it doesn't get cut off at the end, like it's cut short. No, it's shortened by starting late. It's delayed, and then it finishes out. So hopefully that makes sense.
Oh,
But
and I just put this up for JD had talked about the Jewish calendar. Steve and I have not. The dates we're discussing right now are not the Hillel Jewish calendar. That
correct.
Just I don't like really to do calendar debates, but I believe it is the sun, moon, and stars that determine the Moedim. We have 3 witnesses, not just 2, not just one. It's not just lunar. It's not just solar. The constellations factor into this, and the solstice, and so that's where I'm at right now. But if someone wants to do the Essene or the Zadok or whatever, as long as they're not going to tell me I'm going to be cast in the lake of fire because I didn't understand the calendar correctly, then we can hang out and be friends. But
absolutely,
I'll talk with you about it for about 30 or 40 minutes. But then I'd just rather not. It's sort of like the shape of the earth. There's just certain subjects, if you're passionate about it and I'm not,
yeah.
I've studied this out. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Forgive me. I was going to say, if they have a question of where we stand, at least where I stand on it, we have our teaching simply titled The Calendar, and it explains our current understanding. And I have looked at the calendar multiple times, and every time I look at it, I get more and more solidified that it's the way we do it is correct. And everyone will say the same thing for their view. So it's, I'm totally cool with that. But I do believe that when Yeshua comes, this is noted in Matthew 24, I think around verse 30, he says that, the heavenly bodies will be shaken. That's the heavenly bodies, sun, moon, stars, all of them are shaken back into position. Everything is going to be positioned again to the perfect calendar that we used to be on, that being a 360-day year, 12 perfect 30-day months that had a 7-year cycle. And then every 7 years, it cycled all over again.
And so, I'm not dogmatic on that, but I'm up to 99.99%. And that's why I think the Essene and the Zadok and all those calendars, that was a bunch of 1st century, 2nd century Jewish sects trying to fit a 365.25 square peg into a perfect 360 round hole.
I would debate you on that and saying it goes back even farther than that.
Oh, really?
It goes back to the time of Jeremiah. It's the lying pin of the scribes.
So even prior to Hezekiah's shadow.
Well, no, it's because of Hezekiah's shadow, and Jeremiah came after that.
Okay.
Because Jeremiah is prophesying the Babylonian invasion, which was happened because of Hezekiah. Okay, and so the shadow going back 10 steps, okay, on the sundial. Okay, that was Hezekiah. Right, there you go. Right, exactly. And so the whole point, though, is that all got screwed up at the time of Hezekiah. Well, then 80 years, I'm going to plus or minus. Yeah, you get the time of the Babylonian invasion, and that's the time of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is so mad at the people over and over again. And, there's no reason. You understand why he was called the weeping prophet. The people were not listening to him. And Yahweh said they're not going to listen to you. They're stuck in their ways. And my concern, though, is that people are following the lying pin of the scribes today. And I'll hear people saying, oh, well, Steve, it came from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, well, let's talk about that for a second. The Dead Sea Scrolls are packed with multiple things. In fact, there is a book of Isaiah that's 800 BC. Okay, 800 BC. So awesome. there is a book of Isaiah that was around during the days of Jeremiah. Okay, so now that lets me know there's going to be books from the time of Jeremiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls. What's Jeremiah say? The lying pin of the scribes. What were they lying about? I can promise you it was all about the calendar. Anything that dealt with it, because the whole world was in upheaval about the sun, moon, and stars changing at the time of Hezekiah. If you haven't seen my teaching, I forgot the guy who said it is from Rome, and he dates and shows, documents, I should say, how the moon was going in funky different cycles from 30 days a month to 40 days a month, 28 days a month, then to 25 days a month. And it was like going berserk.
Yeah, I was shaking
no one knew what was going on. I mean, the whole world's in upheaval. And now all of a sudden, this calendar that the Hebrews followed was out of whack too. And well, they claim to serve who? The God of the sun, moon, and stars. Well, so what are they doing? They start manipulating everything. They said, well, we've always done this. And then they got this way of doing it. And that's, I'll tell you what, man, that's a topic
you can borrow this from me, because I don't think this would happen, but let's just assume that America has a nuclear war or something happens and Yellowstone blows up. And then 2,000 years from now, a bunch of archaeologists, civilization has returned, and they come back and they find a vault up under the Latter-day Saints temple of these ancient scrolls.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Joseph Smith's nonsense is taught as if it's being scripture because it's 2,000 years old. That's right. What I equate a lot. And I believe that specifically, Steve, I believe this, that Paul is warning Timothy not to get into genealogies like the Book of Jubilees,
right?
Not to do the mythologies and base doctrine on it. Like, again, I think there's a lot of good stuff in the Book of Enoch. I think it's
oh man, it's cool.
But I'd also believe it's mythological as well, and it does contain Jewish fables and myths. And
yeah, well, here's the thing too. Yeshua said, Matthew 23, to obey Moses. Okay. He didn't say to obey Jashar. He didn't say to obey Enoch. He didn't say to obey Jubilees. He said, obey Moses. What did Moses give us in Genesis 1? Sun, moon, and stars established the Moedim. There you go. So, but that's a whole, that is the calendar. Well, we went way off track on that with the calendar.
Oh, that's what I did. That's sorry.
No, it's all good.
So you're when you put this up, Steve, you can do teaching on 40 days and the days of Noah and a bunch of other stuff.
Right, there you go. That's great. Well, hey, do we have any, because I've covered most of the stuff as far as why I think we need to be concerned, not concerned, but just be mindful and watching days leading up to Shavuot and why it could be biblical. You know, if we see something happening, I really mean it, whether this year or whatever year, you know, but for this year, it's June 6th, I think we said. If there's something happened, then man, my antenna is going up and I'm going to say, okay, is this it? And we've got to be mindful of that. Whatever year it happens, always be mindful the 10 days leading up to, you know, and there's just so much for us to be mindful of. But do you have any other questions from people who might want to ask something?
I've got a little comment on this too. And again, you mentioned Jeremiah being the weeping prophet to the house of Judah. And this gentleman, actually, I say gentleman, Laura Lee, I'm assuming a female. Ezekiel was told too that they wouldn't listen to him because they were not listening to him, to Yah.
That's right. That's right.
But Ezekiel's frustration was with the stubborn, hard-headed house of Israel, where he was sent to, to witness to them. And again, Ezekiel's hard to understand a lot of times. Who is he talking to? All of Israel? Is he talking to the whole house? Is he talking to Judah? Is he just talking to the lost sheep of the house of Israel?
Right.
So Ezekiel's the hardest one to see the distinctions, I believe.
It is at times. And for those two, we mentioned it earlier regarding the sacrifices. Regarding Ezekiel, if ever anyone's interested in knowing something about why I lean so heavily to the Ark of the Covenant, I have a teaching simply titled, and I can't remember the name of it, What is the Idol of Jealousy? That is a teaching I think I wish every believer would watch. And it's called, What is the Idol of Jealousy? There is just so much packed into that teaching that shows why we should be mindful of the end times with the Ark of the Covenant.
Not really a question, but something. Joel is our co-host now with myself and Doug Hamp on our weekly Prophecy Geek channel. So he's put biblical tahor and tamor unclean to require for people and priests to participate in Sabbath. The Moedim function requires the ashes of the red heifer plus a mikvah to be pure. So I'm going to phrase the question to you. Do you believe that if and when Judah, let's say they do that in 2 days, Steve, that or Judah decides that's a good day to do the red heifer sacrifices, do you believe those are going to be acceptable to Yah or an abomination?
Personally, I lean to an abomination because it's not a priesthood that's established by Yeshua.
And that would be my understanding. Again, I was excited to see them. Again, I believe it sort of has to occur to fulfill prophecy, but it doesn't mean and again, I like Rico. Rico believes that this is a prerequisite for Yeshua return. The temple has to be cleansed, and I just differ with him quite a bit on this issue. Mm-hmm. So, but not throwing anybody under the bus. I just differ with him, and I don't think Isaiah 66 is ambiguous. And there are a lot of people that are still. I like to say, we all still probably have at a minimum a few carry on bags with us from our backgrounds, unless you're just coming in and you've lived on an island and never even heard of the Bible. You're bringing on some baggage. Even if you just watch TV or watch movies, you're going to bring in some theological baggage. But I still believe this dispensational futurism that the Jesuits put out to counter the truth that the papacy is Antichrist. I'm not saying that the current Pope is the Antichrist, but it's an Antichrist religion.
Right.
Up at the topper levels. I'm not talking about the Roman Catholics. I'm not saying, they're deceived, but I'm not calling every Roman Catholic Antichrist. But
no, not at all. Yeah, I'm with you. Yep.
So let's see if we got some more.
You're see what else you got?
Questions. A lot of comments, but let's see. What is the idol of jealousy? Where do I find it? See, that's a good one for you. Tee it up. It's teed up for you.
Okay, yeah, the idol of jealousy is the Ark of the Covenant, and I discussed that in the teaching because it's a direct quote from, not direct quote, but the idol of jealousy is referenced in the book of Ezekiel. And if you go to our website, torahfamily.org, go to the search menu and just put in what is the idol of jealousy, and that teaching will pop up for you. And it maybe be like a 15-20 minute teaching, I think, but to me it just explains so much that people are understanding, and why I really believe the importance of when that art comes out, because it's going to come out, and when it does, it will charge the Judah like something crazy. And that's why I think what triggers the surrounding of Jerusalem in my mind currently, I think that they're going to just storm the Temple Mount. And then that will be for that purpose of taking it over for the Ark of the Covenant and the original tent of meeting that Moses had made. And that's all discussed there. So, but yeah, hopefully you can check that out.
Okay. Anything, and I'm gonna give this to Steve. Anything you could give to show his quote, not mine, the craziness of the Zadok nuts is much appreciated. And I think what he's talking about is so many that are getting into this Zadokian priesthood, Zadok calendar from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
Do you have any teachings or resources on that?
No, but let's backtrack, because I don't want to call craziness.
I know
you're quoting. I get it. These are people. First of all, let's make it a point, because I've got great friends who follow that calendar. And I say great, I mean capital Great. I could confide in them. I know them. They love Yahweh with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength. I just differ with them on the calendar. Okay. So I want us to use caution, because it's so easy to make dividing lines, and it's okay to differ, but don't divide. And so I just feel it needs to be said.
No. And that is,
I can come across very passionate with the calendar, and I'm so sorry that I do that. I don't mean to. It's just I feel that there are some things that are like, dude, it's right there. Why aren't we doing this? But yet we feel we have to do this or go over to this book or go to that book. He gave us everything in the Torah that we need. And that's my view. I get it. Others feel they need to go outside and get this or that and pull it in. But to answer the question, forgive me. I don't have anything I do discuss it slightly in my calendar teaching. I don't address it verbatim, but I'm working on an update to my calendar teaching, and I will be addressing this calendar exactly, and why I believe it is specifically wrong, and why we are following men and not Yahweh's word in that.
And I would assume some of that would go back to Hezekiah's shadow and Yah actually changing what a year is and how long a month is, and the restoration
that's
at the
addressed.
end of the age.
Yeah, that's addressed in the calendar teaching.
So let's see. But well, somebody earlier had put one that it was actually, I believe it was Laura Lee again, but it was to the effect that should we really be concerned about when Yeshua's return and watching, like you watch, I watch, you know. I'll let you answer it first. My thing is, yes, we should be paying attention to prophecy. We shouldn't be newspaper prophets, but we should also be paying attention to what's happening in the world. And with AI, central digital currency, everything kind of converging, aligning, and accelerating. You know, and it just so happens it was about 1,994-ish, plus or minus 2, 3, or 4 years since Yeshua returned to his place. And I don't think that's coincidence, but
right.
We shouldn't go like, I'm not going to quit being an attorney right now unless Yah sits on my head and gives me a vision.
Right.
Says, no, I want you to do this. I'm not going to move to Arkansas and live near Steve and go to the Ozarks, you know, right, in preparation for what I believe is coming.
Well, and Yeshua said to watch and pray. Okay, so I mean, in fact, regarding prophecy, because I heard people say sometimes you can get too crazy with it. Let me give you something here real quick. This is Revelation 19:10. At this I fell at his feet to worship him. But he said to me, do not do it. I'm a fellow servant with you and with your brothers who hold to the testimony of Jesus, Yeshua. Again, this is Revelation 19:10. Then it continues, worship God. And then he says, for the testimony of Yeshua is the spirit of prophecy. The testimony of Yeshua is the spirit. Everything about Yeshua is prophecy, either fulfilled or yet to come. So how can we not look at prophecy? It's all about Yeshua. And so you don't live in fear. I live in excitement, knowing that one day he's coming. Now, I don't, like you just said, I'm not going to go sell everything because I think it's going to happen this Tuesday or what is this, Thursday. No. But whenever something happens, I want to be ready. Here's the thing. People get so weirded out about reading Revelation. The Bible, Revelation says, blessed is he who reads the words of this prophecy. He didn't say blessed are those who understands the word of this prophecy, who can teach the words of it. He says, blessed are those who read the words of this prophecy. Why? Because when the time comes, and when it comes, you'll know, all of a sudden you go, it clicks. Oh my gosh, that's this. That's this. Because why? You read, you studied, you looked at it. It may not have made a lick of sense when you're doing it, but when it starts, it will click. And that's why we study. That's why we read. And that's why I think it's so important to not be so locked into our own dogma on how things are to be interpreted. Read it. You can have it. And you need to have your opinions. You need to have your opinions. But don't hold on to them and think like, well, that's it. Listen to all the different views out there. Put them up on the shelf. And then when things start to happen, you go, oh my, this guy thinks he's right here. This guy was right here. I'm right here on this and the other. And when you lock it, it's like pieces of the puzzle can all be put together right then at the moment. But unless you know, you're going to be following somebody else or your own blinded view. And you're going to say, well, that's not it because that didn't go with what I believe. Well, then now you're lining yourself up for deception.
Well, and I
know the word. Know the word.
Well, I've been a prophecy geek since I was a kid, and I will say, and a reason I've put this up here, and Messiah 2030, I think does a good job explaining this, this what I'm about to refer to here. No one ever actually reads what Yeshua says prior to talking about not knowing the day or the hour. I mean, we know right. Matthew 24 is speaking of his coming, but immediately before that day and hour verses, heaven and earth will pass away.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But the reason I mention is because being a prophecy geek and trying to talk to Christians about prophecy and prophetic events, I go, no one knows the day or the hour. No one knows the day or the hour. I'm like, and now I just want to show them the verse.
How they misconstrued it.
and you've been taught that because, well, and again, the reason most people that are interested in prophecy, if you were Baptist or Pentecostal or charismatic or, in dispensational churches, is because the rapture could happen any second now. So of course we can't know the day or it's a signless event. It's imminent. And it's there's nothing to watch for. I mean, and that is mainstream still prophecy, like our little discussion here, on prophecy. My buddies Curtis and Michael that really get into the Moedim and everything, may get 10,000, 20,000 views. You'll have rinse, wash, and repeat Christian brothers who are basically regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again on the same exact topic of imminence and the rapture, get millions of views.
I know. Man, that's funny. You're saying you're getting that many views. I'm going, I wish I could get that many views. But
well, no. I think the most we ever got on our prophecy roundtable was right at the eclipse, and Joel did some clickbaiting and stuff.
Oh, I got you. I
think we had like 30,000 people watch that one.
So. Right. Well, but the thing is, it's like, I believe in the resurrection, what some call the rapture. I just don't believe how it's going to happen because Yeshua, he didn't say, look, if you're up on top of the roof, don't go back down into it because I want to come and get you right away. He says, flee. Don't go back down. Just get out. Why didn't he just say, don't worry about it. I'll come back and get you. So there's something that's going to happen that we've got to do something. And then it shows us there's something to happen before the resurrection. So that's why I'm so opposed to the it can happen any moment. No, it's the precursors. Yeah, that can happen any moment. I'm with you by way of around the feast days, not just any day. It's still going to happen around his days. That's I am solid on that. And I'm solid on the element that the rapture isn't going to happen like this. The resurrection will happen after things have already progressed and got started. How long it will be? Well, that's yet to be seen. It could be 10 days like we're talking about, So but we got to be open and have our eyes watching on his time frame, not just what we think is happening in the world.
This is a good question, and she's asking you because she doesn't care what I say. Based on your study of the book of Revelation, will there be a second Exodus, and where will it be? I believe I've heard some teaching on this from you, Steve. So
yeah, what's her name? Who am I talking to?
Lena.
Okay, Lena, I have a teaching simply titled The Second Exodus. If you get a chance, please. That is kind of one of my longer teachings. It may be about an hour, maybe. But it really gives biblical understanding that there is a second Exodus with a resurrection. Okay, and it shows that the resurrection is for like we mentioned earlier. You get the three resurrections: Christ the first fruits, and then that is coming. That's the first resurrection. Well, those who miss the first resurrection, they go through the tribulation time. And then the Bible, the prophets specifically talk about the survivors will come back to Jerusalem. That's the second Exodus. They are coming back to Jerusalem at that time. And then the millennium begins with all of his people united together, and we participate. If you look at it's in the Septuagint version of Jeremiah, where it talks about they come back for the Feast of Passover. And so I mentioned that in several different teachings, but I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in that teaching as well.
You mentioned it in the second Passover teaching because
that's for sure. Well, I'm talking as far as the version of the where Jeremiah specifically says they come back for the Feast of Passover. And so I address it in several teachings, but I'm pretty sure I also address it in the second Exodus teaching.
And I believe I'm with you. Or again, my timeline is more fixed as far as it being 42 months and a protection and a fleeing in the wilderness. But I do believe there could be a harpazo of the Revelation 12 man-child, similar to the harpazo of Paul or a guy he knew,
I'm
But
with you.
then those who are not harpazoed and maybe even supernaturally sealed, sort of like the 1,000 from that battle Midian right before they went into the promised land and not one person died. I do believe that's going to be Yah's version of the 1,000 from each tribe, except he's going to multiply it by 12.
Right.
For this. So again, I'm no longer dogmatically saying now that I see in Revelation 12 about the man child being harpazoed. I won't even use the zapture term for that. I will use the rapture term. And then I see in Isaiah 66 about a nation being born in a day before she travails. And I'm going, wait a minute. I do not need to be so dogmatic and mean. It's just not the way our pre-trib brothers teach it. I mean, that they don't even base it on Revelation 12 or Isaiah 66. They base it solely on Daniel 9:27 and 1 Thessalonians. And that occurs at the first resurrection, which, to your point, that's where I differ with you, Steve, as far as believing that this rapture is not going to be the resurrection. And we don't really get that first resurrection until Revelation 20, 1 Corinthians 15, So that's sort of my little timetable. So,
there you go. There you go.
But
we're going on an hour and 20. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing good. But you said you need to hard break at 6:30, correct?
Well, a little bit before that, if possible. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe last question. What about the resurrection that occurred when Yeshua was resurrected? 1 Corinthians 15 does mention Yeshua, the first fruits. And then we do have that little account in Matthew where a bunch of people are walking around.
Yeah, it's Matthew 27, isn't it?
Yeah. You've got a bunch of resurrected saints. So
no, they're not resurrected.
Okay.
They're raised to life.
Okay.
Okay, because remember, let's look. If you go to the context, it says they were raised to life the second he died.
Okay.
Okay. So then, what's that mean? That's saying that they're the first fruits before Yeshua even raised. But Yeshua is the first fruits, according to 1 Corinthians 15. These people were just like Lazarus. They were raised to life and they died again. Otherwise, if we say they were resurrected, that means they were the first to have a new body before even Yeshua had a new body. And it says he's the second Adam. So if he's the second Adam,
they'd be like Tabitha, or they would be like Elisha, the individuals that Yah used that Elisha raised and Elijah raised. They died again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Because if Yeshua is the second Adam, that means he's the first one with the new body. He's the second Adam, not these people. So they could not have and it's like, if he's the firstborn from the dead, how can they be? So they did not experience the resurrected body. A resurrected body means you have a spiritual body, but they were raised with the same physical body as Lazarus did. And so they died again.
Okay. I'm going to put up Laura Lee's. Wowzers, you guys make my brain hurt. And what you've got is two guys that have been prophecy geeks for years, sitting here just bantering back and forth with some scripture.
Right.
And I've got one last question for you on that. Who are the 24 elders then?
I have been looking into that. Okay. The 24 elders are sitting around the throne. And it says there's a rainbow around the throne. Okay. I'm really excited. So I'm digging into this, and I've seen, I don't know who it was, they were sharing it. And I'm liking it. So I'm digging more into it, and there's something to it. From what I'm gathering, I see flat earth, globe, doesn't matter to me what you want to believe. But if you've got the aurora borealis, which is the exact same colors of the rainbow that's mentioned around the throne, well, then you've got the 24 elders. Well, we're all know about the zodiac, which I'm trying to think of what it is in the Hebrew. The Mazarov. Thank you. Right. Well, this has 12 of the constellations. Well, if you really pack them all in, there's 24, and it covers the 24 hours of the day. So you've got the 24 elders that are around the throne, that being the constellations that are around the throne. Okay. And then you got this aurora borealis. It's right there. I can't I'm digging into it still. There's so much there, but I'm thinking it's like right in front of our eyes and we don't even realize it.
And Joel loves looking at he lives up in Minnesota. Joel Blackford does, and he loves looking at the Northern Lights. We got to see them for like one night down here through the lens of a camera, and that was about it.
Yeah. I hear you. Yep.
Well, I appreciate it, man. You said you needed to go a little bit before, and you got better things to do and cooler people to hang out with.
I'm so sorry.
Well, until next time, I'd love to do it again in a few months and just sit there and chit chat with you. If you think of a good topic, let me know.
Amen, brother. That sounds like a good idea. I love it.
All right. Talk to you later.
And thank you to everyone else out there.
All right.